Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. A very good afternoon, Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear friends. Thank you all for being here. My name is Martin Albani. For the last more than 15 years, I have been, Sarah mentioned it, had the privilege to work on building peace as a European Union diplomat and official, and as an independent peacebuilding advisor. And until earlier this year, I headed the peace, mediation, and dialogue sector of the European Union's external service. That's the sector that coordinates the EU's engagement in peace processes and supports mediation and dialogue processes worldwide. Now, there are many valuable lessons I could share, professional insights, but I don't want to do this today. I want to talk to you about something more personal. I want to share what inspires me to act for peace and to continue to do so. After all, peace is always being built by people, and we all have a personal story with it. Mine started at a very young age. When I was still a child, I grew up in socialist Eastern Germany, a dictatorship that suppressed its people and stifled any dissent. If you resisted, even passively, you had to face severe personal consequences. And yet, the longing of the people for freedom and democracy could not be suppressed forever. I will never forget the intense emotions of 1989, when I was demonstrating in the streets, holding my father's hand against the feared state security service, the Stasi. There was hope and excitement in the air, but you could also smell the fear of what would happen, of how the regime would react. And despite that fear, people chanted peacefully, and we were holding candles. Then back at home, I was glued to our little black and white TV. I was watching the news, press conferences, heard all these heated debates. And then, finally one day, 9th November, that wall that was supposed to last forever, it fell. And I was in Berlin with my parents, hammering small pieces of colorful concrete out of it. I still have them at home. The joy, the jubilation of that day, and of course the start of a long process of rebuilding or building a reunited Germany that still continues today. Earlier this month, we celebrated the 35th anniversary. Of course, I didn't understand all the political implications at the time. I was much too young. But I sensed some key elements that I then found again and again when talking to peace builders all over the world later on. First, we all need a vision, a powerful vision of a better future, one that really resonates for us and inspires us. One that helps us to keep hope alive during long and dark periods of apparent hopelessness. For me, hope is not the conviction that something will turn out the way we want it to be, but it's the certainty that something makes sense no matter how it turns out. To borrow the words of Václav Havel, a very famous Czech activist and later president, who inspired many at the time, including in Eastern Germany. And in today's world, with its very strong security and defense narrative, not being shy about this vision of a peaceful resolution of conflicts seems more important than ever. Secondly, we need fierce determination and the willingness to take risks, both political but also personal. But we also need the endurance to keep trying again and again. Building peace is a long-term process, It doesn't just take a few months or maybe one election cycle. It takes decades. And it is rarely a linear journey. Often we do many steps back before we make real progress. I'm afraid I'm not particularly patient, and I can get really frustrated in this process. But then I remind myself that all conflicts can be solved peacefully. The question rather is, are we willing to try hard enough? And are we willing to try long enough? And finally, and I think this is often overlooked, we need a great deal of humility in this work. Building peace that lasts, not just getting a paper with many signatures on it, is not an ego show. You can never impose solutions from the outside. You can only offer support. The locals are the real conflict experts, not us. And there's no perfection in this work. Rarely do we achieve this textbook, fully inclusive and comprehensive peace agreement that we all aspire to. And when success finally comes, it always has many parents, and the best stories you usually can't talk about. But if you learn to celebrate relative gains and small wins, you can come far, very far, step by step. After all, even a ceasefire that only lasts a few weeks can save the lives of hundreds of people, and it may be a stepping stone to something greater once the time is right. Vision, determination, humility. The longer I work in conflict resolution, the more I am convinced that building peace in the world starts within ourselves. The way out is first of all in. For how can we aspire to build peace when we have lost hope and succumbed to cynicism? Or when we are filled with a thirst for revenge? I'm convinced if you fight hatred with more hatred, you will end up recreating the exact same thing you are opposing. The strength of these peaceful revolutions in Eastern Germany and Central Europe lay precisely in their reliance on the so-called soft tools of reconciliation, nonviolence, and dialogue. But make no mistake, there's nothing soft about these tools. There's nothing soft about the courage to truly listen, the audacity to put your judgments aside, and the daring it takes to find common ground. In fact, this is hard work and incredibly challenging. All the more so when your loved ones or yourself have suffered immense pain. I will never forget the tension in this small negotiation room where representatives from warring parties in a brutally violent and deeply entrenched civil war were facing each other, all of them marked by the severe human rights violations on all sides. Or the minister of an interim government who told me about his cousin, who was coldly murdered by the same military officials he now has to negotiate with. But I also remember the courage of that same minister, his ability to overcome personal pain and to enter into dialogue for the good of his country. And the strength of those confidential dialogue formats where, after many meetings, an atmosphere of respect and cautious trust between bitter rivals had finally and slowly been built. And I remember my grandfathers. Both of them had to fight in World War II. One ended up being a prisoner of war in France. As a child, I often heard their stories and their insistence that that insanity of war can never be allowed to happen again, and that we must reconcile with our neighbors. And it was my grandfather, the one who had been imprisoned in France, who then strongly encouraged me to learn French. I found it very hard in school. And to finally study in university in France. For my grandfathers, peace and reconciliation was something deeply personal, and in fact, it always is. Of course, technical knowledge, political will, and strong institutions matter greatly. As they say, building peace is both an art and a science. But in the end, if you want to build peace that truly lasts, there's no other way than to look deep inside and to recognize the shared humanity and the dignity of the other. For me, peace is not something we can ever possess. The courage to truly listen, to understand, and to build trust has to be practiced every single day anew, starting with ourselves. Thank you very much.